Okay, so give us a little bit of your background and how you went from being in the military to leading this brokerage.
How much time we got?
Oh, I don't mind. Like this can be a Joe Rogan interview if you want. We can go. I mean, I'll have to get my charging cord, but
Um, wow. So my background in the Marine Corps was interesting because in the Marine Corps, when I signed up, I was guaranteed a job. That's what a lot of people get is guaranteed a job. Well, 9/11 happened while I was in boot camp, and it turns out those guarantees have asterisks to them. So when that happened, they changed my job to essentially like a war planner, Marine Air Ground Task Force planner. And most Marines have never heard of what a MAGTF planner is. They've never heard of my code, which is 0511. When we were all plussed up to like 450,000 active duty Marines, there were only 187 in my MOS, military occupational specialty. So it was a very, very specified MOS. So that's what I did in the Marine Corps, and it afforded me the opportunity in 4 years to be able to travel to, well, I was stationed in Okinawa first. I was in two different commands there, 2nd Marine Division and 12th Artillery Regiment. And then I went to the Philippines for like 10 days on an operation during the India-Pakistan conflict in 2002 or 2003-ish. I don't know, a little fuzzy back then. Then I had the opportunity to, like, just during a little mini exercise, climb Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima and like hold a flag up there. That was pretty cool. The sand on Invasion Beach is super interesting. It's like black kitty litter. I can't imagine what they went through, like sinking in this kitty litter type sand while they're taking fire. It was a surreal experience. And it was, by the way, the most fabulous sunrise I've ever seen in my entire life. I'll never forget that sunrise. Um, then I was stationed in North Carolina after that, 2nd Forced Service Support Group, which apparently doesn't exist anymore. And then from there, I was deployed to Haiti in 2004 when they were overthrowing their government. And Operation Secure Tomorrow was that operation. And after that, I went to Iraq and I got my humanitarian service medal in Haiti. And so, yeah, I went to Iraq. So, all in all, I got 12 ribbons and medals in my 4 years in the Marine Corps, which is pretty much unheard of. It afforded me the opportunity to travel. Usually you only go to like one or two places in the Marine Corps, but since my MOS was so specialized, they had us going like everywhere. It was very interesting. So after that, the other side of the sword was my MOS was very specialized. Well, how does that translate to civilian work? I get out and what do I do with this? All my friends have degrees. They're way ahead of me now. Um, and so I just started working retail. I started going to community college. Um, got knocked up and became, essentially single mother. Pretty rough life in the late aughts, I would say mid to late aughts. I, you know, Retail jobs, really struggling. Single mom, very, very close on my making rent every month. I did not have nails done. I did not have hair done. I sacrificed. We went to the library for our entertainment. I learned how to do stuff for free. All of my daughter's Christmas presents came from the dollar store. But I will say, like, the one really fun thing that I went to every year was the Marine Corps birthday. We would find out, oh, is it at this bar? And there'd be like one guy buying shots and pizza or whatever. So I thought that was really neat. And so then, fast forward a little bit, I met somebody just networking and managed to get a contracting job on the Arsenal. The Rock Island Arsenal is close to me, and that has a whole really cool history in and of itself. We should do like another talk about that sometime. And so I got a job on the Rock Island Arsenal, and I specifically remember I got offered $40,000 salary a year, and I was like, I'm rich. I was ecstatic. I just felt so rich. And, sooner I got promoted, 47. Then I finally got an actual government position, a GS 11, and then it was 56. Then I got promoted to GS 12. And like I was doing very well. I was a GS 12 Department of Defense employee, and I had finally done very well for myself. I'd set a great example for my daughter. I had a business degree. I'd finally finished school. I did all kinds of night classes, powered my way through it. And that was back when I thought degrees meant something, you know? I beg to differ now, but that was back when I just feel like our parents raised us and they're like, I don't want my kid working in a factory, And so that's back when I thought degrees meant something. And now I am of the mindset that unless you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, maybe skip that and start at the School of Hard Knocks and find some good mentors, or go to a trade school or something. So anyway, business degree, got that accomplished and built my first home with my daughter. And it was just me and my daughter in my first home, 4 bedroom, 3 bathroom. And I was very proud of that. And it was a great little neighborhood and life was just great. And then less than 3 years later, and another, a marriage in, that's my second marriage. I got married and we decided, hey, he's like, this is your house. Let's have an us house. Let's build together. So we decided to sell my house and build a house. And in the process of selling my house, not only did I make a lot of money from the equity of that house, just in 3 years, I think I netted after paying the agent 50 grand. Remember that 40 grand in 1 year, and I'm like, I'm rich. But anyway, not only did I net like 50 grand, but there were things that happened during the sale of that home to where I'm like, wait a minute, I can do this. And I get bored very easily. I am just not satisfied easily. I'm always looking for the next thing. So when I was working for the government, I very much enjoyed what I did. However, there was a lot of downtime. Government workers are lazy. Their income's guaranteed. Their retirement's guaranteed. So I was like, what am I going to do with my life? And I decided that every time everybody spun around from their chairs and started bullshitting from work or whatever, like about sports or whatever, that I was going to be doing something productive. And my something productive was getting my real estate license. In 2016, I got licensed and it was pretty interesting. For some reason, it's okay to like bullshit about sports and stuff, but God forbid I talk about real estate at all. Like that was not cool. And they wanted to make sure I kept these jobs very separate. So I did. I ended up, I made 60 in Iowa. This is really good, by the way. I think it's really good anywhere in America, but I did about 60 grand GCI my very first year. And this was like nobody training me, nobody helping me, nobody giving me leads. And, but I was exhausted. because I wasn't a part-time realtor. I had two full-time jobs. And I think any good agent, if they're going to work and be a real estate agent, should only be a full-time real estate agent. I don't respect part-time agents. So I had two full-time jobs and I was getting really stressed out. Oh, and I was getting my MBA at the time. I was
Why not just
halfway through
add some
that.
more?
Halfway through my MBA. I had already passed the hard stuff, the accounting, all that crap. I'm not good with numbers. And then I decided something had to give. And that's the first thing I threw away. I'm like, that's not going to make me more money, you know? And I don't regret it at all. I don't regret throwing away my MBA. And so 2017, I started feeling extremely dissatisfied with my government employment. And I started thinking, wow, I kind of want the side of real estate where I can just go to lunch when I want, or I don't have to get up super early and drag my ass through a parking lot in winter and stay at, all the freedom that real estate gives me. And I also struggle with PTSD and depression. And so as a result of my military service, and so my husband at the time, he was like, maybe you should put in a disability claim. And I'm like, no, I'll put in a disability claim when it impacts me or negatively impacts me or it affects me. And one day I resigned from my position on the Arsenal, and my husband was pissed. I was like, I'm going to make it work in real estate. And I mean, he was just livid with me. And he goes, I want you to go make a disability claim now because you told me you would do it once you were, negatively impacted by your PTSD. And I'm telling you, you're depressed and you need to go do that. And so I did. And I got a 70% VA rating. They took it seriously. And I do have that. And I don't let it define me, but I also like the fact that I have it because anybody that comes to me trying to complain, I'm like, we all have a personal responsibility to ourselves. Like nobody's going to save us. And so the victim mentality won't work on me, right? I am the tough love person. You're not going to come to me for sympathy. Go to anybody else, really. So so I really, really struggled in real estate after that, though, because I was depressed and then I didn't have structure. The busier you are, the more successful you are. And so I wasn't busy because I didn't have my Arsenal job anymore. And I was drinking a lot. I was just like drinking all day. I don't know, I just was worthless. And finally, like in 2020-ish, I was like, kind of who am I? What am I doing? And my career was up and down in real estate. You know, question mark, when am I going to get another deal and close? And we were just barely getting by because I was the breadwinner of my household. It all landed on my shoulders. And so it was a lot of pressure on top of that. So it was probably part of why I drank, right? And so it was a lot of pressure. And in 2020, I just started like being easier on myself and allowing myself to be myself, right? So in real estate, we're taught to act a certain way. We're taught to behave a certain way. And we're taught to like have this cute profile, like perfect headshot, right? And stuff. And I started being like, I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want. I'm gonna say whatever the fuck I want on social media, not be like crazy, but I'm going to be myself and be relatable. That way people feel like they know me when they meet me and start talking to me. So I, when you and I converse, Josh, like I do cuss. Like the
No.
way that I'm talking to you right now is the way that I talk all the time. Or I'm going to get an attitude or whatever I'm going to do. And in 2020, obviously, it was a very heavy political climate during that year. And so I finally took a stand, and I was just like, I'm against this mask stuff. I'm against all this stay at home after several months. You're telling us to stay at home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. This is bullshit. I finally came out and was like, I'm for the Constitution. How about that? And oh my God, it just like raised such a shitstorm. And it was very interesting because there were several agents that DM'd me and were like, I just wish I could say that. I wish I could say that out loud, but I'm terrified. But I'm glad you did. I'm glad you said it. And then and you know what happened, Josh, is I started getting some of the biggest deals I'd ever gotten in real estate. Some of the biggest, because they know where they stand with you once you are yourself. And if you do video and you're completely yourself, then they feel like they already know you. So I had this podcast in 2020. I weighed a lot more back then too. I weighed like 230 pounds. And I had this podcast and I live streamed it. I was horrified to live stream it, but my producer was like, "No, this is what we're gonna do. Otherwise you over edit and it never gets out there, right?" And so that's what we did. And we just put content out there and it just started working and it was great. And people in the community would just start walking up to me and being like, I've seen your stuff on social media or whatever. And you could see on Facebook when people would hate watch you, like your competitors and stuff, and they talk smack about you. But I'm like, oh, so and so's watching. That's funny. So anyway, that was a big turning point for my business. Then in 2021, a lot of growth happened for me. I went to this kind of like this culty thing. It was called PSI, Personal Success Institute. And I recognized some of the things like that some of the mind tricks that they did from Marine Corps boot camp, It was just like one of those weekend seminars, right? But I went to it and I committed to it and I sat my ass through the 3-day thing and I was completely changed after that. I didn't take everything away from it, but here's what I did take from it. I decided from then on out that I was going to keep my commitments. If I made an appointment with somebody, I was going to keep that appointment. And so that allowed me to not say yes to everything. I wouldn't so much as commit, like Josh, you will never hear me commit to 75 hard. Not going to do it because I have no interest in doing that. And I just know I'm not going to make it. No interest in it. I'm not going to commit to 75 hard. But what I did start this week was I love Peloton workout. So I started this like 4 workout thing a week. And, that I can do. I can commit to that. And so I won't let myself not do it, you know?
Yeah.
So I learned from that one weekend that your self-worth is directly tied to your ability to keep your word. And that includes keeping your word to others and keeping your word to yourself. So every time you say, "Oh, I'm gonna like start my diet today," or "I'm gonna work out," or "I'm gonna make these calls," or "I'm gonna whatever," every time you tell yourself you're going to do something and you don't do it, you lose a little bit of self-confidence, a little bit of self-worth. So I left that and I just decided I'm not going to commit to anything that I'm not going to do. So I started really, really small. And of course, it's addicting when you start having success, little successes. So I kept leveling up what I was successful at. And I guess here I am.
So, well, and I think it's interesting to see that progression of where everything went from, the military to um real estate, which you're kind of similar to me, and like that was not the plan. Like real estate was just something that kind of happened,
Mhm.
and that was how it was for me. But I think a lot of the times they make the best real estate agents because it's not a plan. You have no preconceived notions. You just jump in and see what happens. So, um, how do you think now that you're leading this startup company, the exponential growth that you guys have seen within the last year? I mean, we're talking really just about 8 months now at this point. You guys have grown so much so quickly in Iowa. What type of things do you take from your military training that have helped you now on the civilian side? Because one thing I've noticed, I've only been around a short time, but from a leadership standpoint, it's really obvious that you and Holly both, but you guys lead from the front. And the backstory to this for anyone that doesn't know is I'm actually married to somebody who was a Marine as well. So I kind of see some of these traits in Sandi Lyn that I see in my own wife about dedication. And I think a lot of that is military training personally and just chain of command. It's amazing to me the organizational structure that I've seen with this company versus others. And that was one thing that really pushed me over the edge was you guys had a flow chart. You had a command structure. And all too often I've seen brokerages that are just this amalgamation of nothingness and it causes all sorts of problems. Do you think that is all from the military that you got that kind of structure and that, or what other things do you think helped with that?
I do think that that part is, I have the military to thank for that. It's very clear how, it should be very clear who people should know who to report to. Otherwise, it just creates chaos and confusion in a company. It's not about ego. So when Holly and I were setting this company up, we both are co-founders, co-owners of this company, but we hold two very different roles. And if you look at that flow chart, CEO is above COO, but that is for a very important reason. People have to know that there is an escalation procedure to things. They have to know who are ultimate decision makers. But it goes both ways. For instance, if there's a decision, an important decision to be made in brokerage operations, Holly's an expert. Not only is she a subject matter expert in brokerage operations, but she's also chief of operations. So a lot of times I will defer to her for that decision making instead of just, letting my ego do the talking and just trying to make all the decisions. So that is what I guess a good commanding general would do. They rely on their subject matter experts to make recommendations, very strong recommendations, right? You've been in some meetings with me where there are strong recommendations made, and I vehemently disagree with them, and we move on, right? But that is because it's the CEO's job to uphold our, mission, vision, and core values and to stick to those and until the puzzle pieces fit. And I've also seen that with other brokerages where the CEOs lose sight of where they were going, why they started what they started. They just completely lose sight. So that part of it was from my business degree. I truly believe that part of it was. Back to the question you asked me, though. I believe that my military experience and my government service experience helps specifically with this national brokerage that we're building because of the scalability. I've seen a lot of failures in the scalability where these brokerages get so big, but they don't have their finger on the pulse with the local agents. Let's say a natural disaster happens, they wouldn't even know who of their agents are affected by it, if there are any hospitalizations or deaths. And I think that, frankly, that's awful. And I do love the fact that we are implementing systems to where we will keep tabs on that, and it goes all the way up to all the way up the chain every day. We're that big brokerage with the small, I'm trying to say,
Small feel.
yeah, the small brokerage feel.
Yeah. So, which I think that's, totally a testament just to the leadership so far that you guys have maintained. Because I would say at this point, we're no longer a small brokerage. We have enough agents now that I feel like it's no longer a small brokerage. We've passed that point, but it does still feel that way. And I think a lot of it is just the support. One thing with talking to you and Holly that was really important was, supporting agents, and going to bat for your agents. And that's one thing that, I think is pretty rare, especially in the real estate industry. I think a lot of times it's very much self-satisfaction of what can I do for myself? And even unfortunately, I've seen this with a lot of brokers. It's like they'll just not care about the agents that they're managing because they're all focused on themselves. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like when it comes to broker support, you guys have really laid a fine line of like that's super important. And real agent and broker support, that's really important to you guys. Do you think that came from the military, um, as well? Because I feel like that is totally like, your people above you have your back. And that's one thing that's I think very impressive about my real estate company is that level. And I think my guess would be that it's military related.
I don't think I've ever told you this story, Josh, so I think it's hilarious that you're asking this question. There was a situation where we had sent a total of four referrals out to another brokerage, and those four separate referrals had closed as far back as March. And our administrative team had been following up for payment, and the brokerage just kept giving us the runaround. And each staff meeting, our compliance and admin department would report to us and be like, yes, this was their response, and they had internal issues, just whatever. And I heard this go on for months, and I don't like to get involved in those matters usually, but for how long that it had gone on was quite ridiculous. The first referral had closed in March. It was probably late September when I finally got involved. Okay. So all I did was, write a sternly worded email and made sure that the whole leadership for that brokerage was on that email, along with the agents who had been involved in the transactions because they were already on the chain. And I basically said, your internal issues are none of my concern. Your brokerage committed to paying these fees. My agents deserve to get paid. So you have until X date, and we will expect to see this money. Um, they wrote back calling me a bully. I mean, there were two separate emails, talk to our lawyers, like we don't tolerate bullying, all this other stuff. And wouldn't you know it, had a check a couple days later, right? So easy. And one of our agents just said to me right after that, she goes, I just don't know who else would have gone to bat for us and gotten our money. And it was just a really good feeling because it's true. It was just really funny. They're all big and bad, with talk to our lawyers and don't ever talk to any of us again. And they even said that we weren't allowed to send them referrals anymore. Like, we're not allowed to give you guys business. Okay, that's fine, I guess. But you're only hurting your own agents. Their own agents were on that chain. Their own agents were really upset to hear that, by the way. So it's just, yeah, completely different leadership style. And my agents were paid and very happy about that.
Yeah. So, well, and I think, that's one of the big things that I've really seen has differentiated you guys in my time here has just been the amount of support that you're giving. But let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about like the forward thinkingness of the brokerage because you guys are doing some things technology wise that I've never seen. And I've been around real estate for 10 years. But like, for example, you guys are using Slack to run transaction management, and most brokerages are running dot loop, sky slope, all those type of things. But you guys have found basically a proprietary method to run transaction management through Slack. And personally, at first, I was a little bit like, I'm interested to see how this works. In my opinion, it works very well. But those forward thinking things, is that something that you learned in the military? How did you guys come up with some of those ideas? Because you're consistently pushing the envelope.
I would have to say part of that, we have my stubbornness to thank for it. I'm not gonna lie. Um, I did have the idea in my head. Holly and I kind of dreamt it up, but I really had a specific idea of how I knew Slack could work for our compliance. We could offer agents e-sign platform of choice, whichever you want to use, and then it's going to feed into Slack for compliance and we can track it that way and it can all be automated. Well, I wish you would have been there for the ride, but you'll catch it in the documentary. But you should have seen all these different programs that Holly kept testing out because she was going to feed these programs back into Slack. And I was like, no, this can be done directly inside Slack. And so it was pretty much my stubbornness to thank for it. We really think it's truly important that agents don't have to log into a bunch of different systems to run their business. So the systems that we do commit to, we want them to be the very best at what they do. So the systems that we use for our agents, they're piecemealed together. Like we don't buy one all-encompassing system that does everything because I know that it sucks at some of the things that it does, right? So other brokerages have poorly executed Slack, and therefore it's put a bad taste in agents' mouths. I would like to say that we actually did Slack first. I want to point that out. However, um, it's very important to train the agents properly and not just like feed them to the wolves and throw them into the pool and hope they can swim. It's Slack can be extremely intimidating. I did not like Slack. I did not want to use Slack when I first had to use it. And then somebody kind of eased me into it. They created a different channel for every time I started talking about a subject or a project or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I get it now, right? So I think it's just about watching that light bulb go off for an agent. And the other big thing is that, you know what? This is a crazy idea, but not every single agent is the same. And not every single agent learns the same way. So just a little bit of extra time and support for how each agent learns can make all the difference in the world for the rest of their time as a real estate agent with our brokerage.
Yeah. So obviously you have experience with other brokerages, and I'm not going to ask you to name them, obviously, because we don't want to get this taken down or anything. But in your experience, talk a little bit about how, like, the failures you saw at other brokerages, and then what you guys have decided to do differently because of those. And, were those things that you picked up at business school, in the military? Give us a rundown on those things, because I think that's one thing that really differentiates my real estate company is everybody does real estate, but you guys are doing things much differently. And I think it goes back to what you learned from others' failures, other businesses that you were involved in that I won't say failures, but they couldn't thrive to the level that they potentially could.
Well, I'll say one thing that I was very pleased to see the direction of brokerages going was to see them starting to go the virtual route. So back in 2017, when I resigned from my government position, I was lead of continuity of operations for a local Army command. And in the continuity of operations, basically the idea behind that is like, oh, what if a bomb went off over here? How would we continue our operations? Well, we have different little stations and headquarters that we know and different people that would take over, and we just have these different plans, right? Different plans in place. So I had went to them and proposed that, hey, I think we should allow our government employees to start teleworking one day a week, even just to keep we all had laptops. Just let us take our laptops home one day a week. It's good for morale, and it would also make sure that we would be in the position to telework should an emergency event or a disaster ever happen. And I was basically laughed out of my position. They were like, "Oh, I never got, you know." And so I was just disgusted at how against innovation they were. And I was with, a brick and mortar brokerage back then. And when I resigned from my government position, and shortly after, in less than a year, I did find a virtual brokerage. And that virtual brokerage had been around for a while, but I just had never discovered them. And I discovered this virtual brokerage on my own. Nobody had, you know, showed it to me or anything. So I was very excited to see it. However, I was a pioneer for that brokerage in my local area. I was like the 11th agent in our state to join it, and I really paved the way for a lot of other agents. So I had to kind of go through some shit for it. Now, so that is something where I truly feel that real estate agents should I want to say give it a chance, but what I mean is like,
Don't dismiss it. Like,
yeah, I feel like real estate agents shouldn't be dismissive of virtual brokerages because there's a right way to spend money on real estate, and then there's like needless ways to spend money on real estate. And when's the last time you've seen that office full of cubicles full?
yeah,
So, so the virtual office has been amazing, but it might not have been always well executed. So we have implemented basically Zoom room hours, Zoom office hours. Agents, whether you're with our brokerage or not, can come into our Zoom office any weekday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central and get a human being face to face. And I can't tell you, Josh, if I would drive to my previous brokerages, if I could have even guaranteed the same thing.
yeah. I mean, that was always my experience. Even when you have a physical office, if you show up there, most of the time the people that could answer your questions weren't even there. And
Yes.
then I ended up wasting a lot more time because, big shocker, I like to talk. And so I would just start talking to people about all things, maybe a little bit real estate related, but it really didn't add value. It just wasted my time. So I totally get that one.
And then the other thing that seemed seemed like a good idea at first that everybody's going to take a good idea, right? And then find ways to maybe turn it toxic. So I thought that the whole profit share, rev share, agents recruiting agents model at first at these big national virtual brokerages. I thought that it was a great idea at first, especially since I was at the forefront of it in 2018 when I joined. But there was something, first of all, Josh, that never felt right. It never felt natural for me to try and pitch a brokerage that wasn't mine. First of all, wasn't mine. I had no stake in this brokerage. I had no stake in how it was being ran. So it was kind of weird for me to do this and be like, and if you bring in five more people and then it opens this tier, it just felt a little dirty for me. Oh, but it's not a pyramid. And then I had to have to overcome that objection, which I could do. And like I knew how to do it. And it was like, why do I have to learn to do this? But I did. I knew how to do it. So there were all these toxic things that came from rev share and downlines where agents would feel specifically alone on an island. And that came from the virtual aspect of not being able to get a hold of a human, but also if they accidentally picked the wrong upline, they aligned with the wrong upline, God forbid, and then they're frozen out by people that they didn't realize they'd be frozen out by. And just this clickiness and all this other stuff that happens. So other brokerages, try as they might, they still kept the rev share system, but then they said, oh, we have rules against, clickiness or whatever. I'm sorry, there's no way you're ever going to get around that if you keep the rev share system. So we completely did away with the rev share system. We completely did away with the MLM system. We want agents to get back to doing what they do best. Plus, also, it took agents' eyes off the prize. It took them away from focusing on sales and production. And we want them to be the very best at at their craft, right? So we focus our agents on production and they are awarded and they are rewarded on production. And if somebody joins the brokerage, but there is no downline, there's no constant rev share, there's nothing like that. What they are awarded in is ownership stake in the brokerage and it's equity. And there are perks like think of it like a country club membership. So you get like a seat at the table, VIP access. As we grow, the equity members will have more access to me than just regular agents, things like that. And the point of that is that the equity members have more stake in the brokerage than anybody, so they should have more say, right? And the third thing that I think that these national brokerages didn't get quite right, but they couldn't have possibly known without having it play out, is the whole stock and going public and all this stuff. So we're doing that differently as well. We're issuing ownership equity shares, and it's different than fake stock that may or may not be worth something someday.
Yeah.
It's different than us selling you a lottery ticket that, hey, bet on us and this may or may not go public type thing. It doesn't matter whether we go public or not. What matters is the value of our specific brokerage.
Yeah.
And that is what your value and your equity is going to be worth, right? And I think that that's why that works. And yeah.
Well, and I think you said something to me that was I thought very insightful. And you know how I am with quotes, so I actually wrote it down when you said it. But you said, we understand the industry is broken, and we understand that all these agents are looking for ways to make more revenue, be more successful. And you were like, our goal is to make them more successful selling real estate, not recruiting other agents. And it was funny because someone who has never been necessarily involved in one of the rev share model brokerages, it's kind of foreign. And part of it was I was always against it because I always thought the same way that you're talking about right now, where it's like I'm investing something and I'm bringing somebody into a company and saying that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but yet I
Mhm.
have no control over how the companies run. And what we've seen with most of these companies is the second that they go public, agents and people just get put on the back burner because it's all about the investor and profits, which I understand, once you go public, that's just how it has to work. So I totally get that. But I thought that was really insightful for you to say, our goal is to teach our agents to be better at selling real estate and more profitable that way. And so that was one thing that really stuck with me when you guys said that, because that's something that's I'm passionate about is like we need to make a better industry. So, um,
Thank you for pointing that out, Josh, because that was also one of the toxic things about these downlines is these agents would say, I'm the backbone of the brokerage. I'm the one producing. I'm the one making the brokerage money. So why am I getting awarded this fake stock that may or may not be worth something in 3 years? And then this guy that recruited me and also cold called 200 other agents is the one getting real money off of my back.
yeah,
Makes no sense.
no.